We face a crisis at our border, a real, serious, and sustained crisis. We have tens of thousands of illegal aliens arriving at our doorstep every month. We have drugs, criminals, and violence spilling into our country every week. And we have smugglers and traffickers who profit from human misery every single day by exploiting people who are seeking a better life, deceiving them about our laws, and fueling everything from sexual slavery to the smuggling of illicit goods. This chain of human misery is no more evident than with the tragic death of 7-year-old Jacqueline Cal McKean. Her death has deeply affected the Border Patrol agents involved in her case and the entire department. My heart goes out to her family and loved ones, and our entire department mourns this tragedy. What's more, the caravans, the so-called caravans headed towards our country, highlight how out of control the situation has become. Working with our partners, we have identified more than 600 criminals in the latest caravan flow, including individuals who have committed robberies, sexual assault, battery, and more. We cannot let them sneak into our country. That's why we have a legal process, a front door, to do the right screening and vetting to keep Americans safe. But it's still not enough. We need Congress to act, or America's borders will never be fully secure. In fact, until we deal with the poorly written and outdated laws that contribute to this problem, the situation will only get worse. Simply put, the laws are not keeping up with the migrant flows. The legal loopholes are obvious. We've talked quite a bit about them. In the interest of time, Chairman, I'm happy to go back, but noticing the time, what I'd like to focus on is the fact that despite congressional inaction, we will not wait. We will not simply stand by as the crisis worsens. As the numbers go up, as the drugs flow in, as crime seeps into our communities, as the human toll grows along the very dangerous journey to our borders. For nearly 2 years, we've been working to stop illegal entry while also standing by our commitment to protect people who are actually fleeing real persecution. Sadly, many migrants have been misled by smugglers that they can claim asylum if they are seeking jobs or if they would like to reunite with their families. So the bottom line is this: all too frequently, if they say the magic words, they get a free pass into America. So what we're trying to accomplish are, what I call the common cause elements of the crisis that we all share in the region. We want to be able to help those vulnerable populations as soon as possible. We do not want to have laws or loopholes that encourage them to put themselves at danger at the hands of smugglers and traffickers. We want to discourage those who are claiming asylum fraudulently. As you, Chairman, know better than anyone, 80% pass that initial credible fear test, but only 1 out of 10 from Central America are actually granted asylum by a judge. Much of that is because they've been misled by smugglers. This will make it clear what exactly our asylum laws allow for.
Over the past year and a half, and in your written testimony, you've repeatedly asked Congress to close legislative loopholes that lead to the policy of catch and release of aliens along the southwest border. Please tell us which loopholes the department needs Congress to close.
Sure. So the first one relates to families. As you know, under a court ruling, under Flores, right now, if we detain a family who comes here illegally, we are only able to detain them with a child for 21 days. The difficulty with that is we cannot complete the court process within that time period. So we have been working on a reg, as you know, it's out for public comment. But what we are seeking to do is ensure that we can detain through removal. That is how the immigration process is meant to work. About a decade ago, as you know, removals recurred in a matter of hours. Now it can take years. So the goal here is to be able to not catch and release, but to catch and detain, or under our new protocols, to catch and remain in Mexico. The second one is UACs. We treat children differently. And that was because back in the day when the TVPRA was passed, the flow was very different. It used to be 98% from Mexico. Now it's about 60% from Central America. But if you're a child from Central America, you are treated differently than a Mexican child. So what that does is that enables an incentive for parents to unfortunately send their children unaccompanied on an extraordinarily dangerous journey to our borders. The third one is a court decision called Zavadas that we've talked about before. This requires the Department of Homeland Security to be able to return an illegal alien after a conviction back to their originating country within 180 days. If it is unlikely that we will be able to do that, we have to release them into the interior. The good news there is that we have had substantial progress with so-called recalcitrant countries, but the loophole itself encourages illegal behavior because there is no consequence. The fourth one I would just mention briefly is asylum. We've got to affix the asylum laws. The way that we know that is because, as I mentioned, 80% pass that initial credible fear, but only 10% are granted asylum by a judge. The process takes many years. In the meantime, the illegal alien is within the interior, has a work permit, and unfortunately, more than not, does not appear for court cases.
Thank you. On Tuesday, HHS announced that it would no longer require adult members of sponsor households to undergo biometric background checks before placing an unaccompanied alien child with the sponsor in the home. But such a requirement is a clear part of the April 2018 Memorandum of Agreement between CBP and ICE and the Administration for Children and Families and the Office of Refugees Resettlement at Health and Human Services, governing information sharing in unaccompanied alien child matters. What does the Department of Homeland Security plan to do, given that the Department of Health and Human Services has seemingly breached the agreement and will no longer be providing DHS biometric information regarding adults living in households with unaccompanied children?
So there's been some confusion about that announcement. Every sponsor in which the UAC will be placed will continue to be fingerprinted and a background check will be run. What the Department of Health and Human Services decided to do, as I understand it, is they will continue to collect the fingerprints and do the background checks on household adults, not the sponsor, but other adults living in the household. But that will not prevent them from placing the UAC with the sponsor in the interim. So the checks will continue to be done. It's one of sequencing. As to the larger question, we will continue to work with HHS to make sure that the MOU is fully implemented.
And finally, isn't it true that children are being exploited by adults in order to leverage loopholes in immigration law and come to the U.S. since they know that they will be released once they get here if they have a child with them? Hasn't this resulted in instances where children have been raped, otherwise harmed, or even died?
Yes, sir. This is one of the more concerning parts of this flow. The smugglers and traffickers are not humanitarians. It's a business enterprise for them. The stats are staggering. 30% of females on this journey are sexually abused. 70% of all migrants are victims of some form of violence. 17% of males are sexually abused. The children, unfortunately, face the exact same situation. So as a result, as an example, we give a pregnancy test to all girls who are over 9 years old because of the dangers of the journey and our desire to make sure that we can protect them. Adults do realize, as smugglers and traffickers, that if they grab a kid and they appear at the border, they will come in. Worst case scenario, they will be detained for 20 days and then they will be released. Yes, the fraud continues to grow. It's extraordinarily dangerous.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, for his questions.
You said that 80% of people have passed a credible fear interview, but only 10% get asylum.
Yes, sir.
Anyone who has a credible fear, by our laws, should get asylum. Why the distinction between the 80% and the 10%?
The thresholds are different. So what we do is we do an initial credible fear screening by the USCIS, and then when it gets to a judge, the judge uses...
The criteria are different is what you're saying. Fine. I would simply note that a policy that deliberately says that anyone who legitimately deserves political asylum should spend years in detention seems to be in gross violation of international law and of United States law.
Understand, sir, but that's not what I said. So it's not that they have...
It is what you said. You admitted to me it's what you said. All right,
They've made a claim for credible fear. They have not been granted asylum.
I didn't ask
so we don't know.
1
out of 10 are granted asylum, sir.
Fine,
The other
and those
9 are
1 out
not.
of 10 will spend years in detention.
Well, the other 9 do not have a legitimate cause for
Fine,
asylum.
I'm talking about the 1 out of 10.
Okay,
Anyone who legitimately seeks political asylum...
The fastest way to get them through the system is through detention. Detention, no, it's true. It's
All right,
40 days
excuse
for
me.
detention. It's
Reclaiming
1,300
my
days
time.
without
The
detention.
faster way would be to have more judges and to have a better process, obviously.
As you know, smugglers oftentimes give the magic words, the folks coming in, whether they're coming in groups or in a caravan. They're told what to say, they say it. As you indicated, they are given a court date, oftentimes disappear into the population. The vast majority never appear for their court dates, and so our laws, as they've been implemented for a long time, have really been a joke. And you're trying to end that, so I commend you for that. Anything you'd like to say in response to that?
My only response, sir, is I want to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of how the asylum process is not working. Even when those claim asylum, after that initial screening, 40% never file an application. If they really needed and wanted asylum, they would follow through. 31% never show up for their court date. We have a huge problem with asylum fraud. We need to work together to combat it.
It's amazing, though. You said if someone is detained as claiming asylum, they get a decision within 40 days on average. If they're not detained, do you say over 1,200 days?
1,300.
1,300 days. Would it help, and I realize the immigration judges are under control of DOJ, but Jeff Sessions has mentioned he thought we ought to get those judges right there on the border where people get an immediate hearing. Would that be something that would be helpful to DHS and to you're being even more considerate than you already are for those coming across illegally?
Yes, sir. So that's something we've been working on with now Acting Attorney General Whitaker. We used to call them port courts, but the concept is to either have the judges right there or to provide civets capability so that we don't lose time in transporting, that we're able to immediately adjudicate the claim.
So I want to speak to asylum seekers in Mesa. So according to some news reports, more than 4,000 Central American people who entered the country illegally, who were not part of the caravan, who declared they were seeking asylum, were released by ICE into the Phoenix metro area between October 12th and November 30th. The report indicated that these people were released with ankle monitoring bracelets and paperwork. They were free to go anywhere they chose to go. My question regarding these 4,000 people being released into the Phoenix metro area is, do you know what type of vetting is done of these individuals before they are released into our communities?
Sir, this is an unfortunate consequence of capacity. As you know, with families under the Flores settlement, we can only hold them for 21 days. So unfortunately, they do have to be released. The difficulty with the ATD is we find that 30% of family members that have ATD cut them off. They abscond. So then we lose track. We have to then go find them. The other thing I would just say, as I mentioned before, is not only is it more expensive to use that than detention, but in fact it lengthens the period substantially. So we go from 40 days to 1,300 days to be able to get them through the process.
Well, thanks. You anticipated my next question, which was, how long does it normally take for these folks to be processed? And I guess my question would be, how many of these people, I think the number I heard last week is that there's, I want to say roughly 700,000 of these people, folks that are running around that have court dates who've requested asylum. And how many of them abscond completely that drop off, we don't ever see them again?
So 40% we find do not file the application after they go through the initial credible fear process. So they're welcome into the United States. They never finish the application. They largely disappear unless we have the ability to detain them briefly, but with families, we don't. 31% are not present at their hearing. So after we schedule the date to give them the opportunity to receive the asylum they claim they need, they do not show for the court case. So it's a difficult situation. We want to protect those who legitimately need asylum, but we need to cut back on the fraud and the others who misunderstand our laws so that we can protect vulnerable populations, but that we can also protect American communities.
So when it comes to credible fear, can you just go a little bit more into the difference between when an individual is coming across a border, the different process that takes place if they come to a legal port?
Sure.
Versus trying to cross illegally? And then secondly, giving that first initial statement around credible fear and how that is different from what is required under statutory requirements within a court of law to actually achieve asylum in the U.S.
So if a migrant comes to a port of entry, they haven't broken any laws. So first of all, they're doing it a legal way, and then they make their claim. When they come between the ports of entry, particularly for single adults, they have broken the law. That is a law that we attempt to uphold, so we will refer them for prosecution. With respect to the thresholds for credible fear, it's a significant possibility is the standard, whereas for asylum, it's a reasonable possibility. So it's a slightly different standard. Obviously, the credible fear standard is more lenient.
Okay, great.
But there's something that we can blame for this death, and it's the current policies of the United States. The fact that the law is encouraging fathers who want to give their daughters a better life, just like I want to give my daughter a better life, to come to the United States illegally in a way that puts their family in jeopardy. It also, what we have is a policy that we have seen an increase in people coming to the United States illegally. We have seen an increase in people that are seeking asylum. And what we know is that these people are being lied to by cartels. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What are the cartels telling them about asylum?
Unfortunately, when we encounter the aliens, we hear everything from their belief that seeking a job is a reason for asylum, seeking to reunify with their family is a reason for asylum.
And they're telling you that that's what they're being told by the cartels.
What the cartels tell them is if you get to the United States, you can get in and just claim asylum. The confusion and the misinformation that they're provided, however, are the many reasons for which asylum might be granted. They also, at the same time, though, do tell them that if they claim a credible fear and use those words, that they will absolutely be given entrance to the country.
So you, as an administration, have been trying to change the policy to discourage these families from coming to the United States through illegal means. For example, you tried a few weeks ago, or maybe a few months ago, to change the policy so everyone would know that if you don't come through port of entry, you're not going to receive asylum, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it seems to me that the same people that are attacking you today for the death of this child and many other deaths that have occurred at the border because of people that are coming here illegally are the same people that are standing in the way of us having a safe way for people to come to the United States.